Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Heck Knows. I'm your host Heck, and I know. In this series, we're going to be having a lot of fun talking about movies, or more specifically, a certain type of bad movie that comes out every year during a dark, dark time referred to as the dump months. Now, to help me explain these dumpy months, let's take a look at this bunk bed. I'm going to be using this bunk throughout this series as a sort of tier list, and we're going to be breaking things down into 3 different tiers, starting with the top tier, which of course is the top bunk. And the top bunk is unquestionably the best option for me here, and seeing as I'm a top tier boy, I'm going to be sleeping on the top bunk. And in the movie business, movies are released in theaters in these sort of seasons, so if we're talking top tier months, the big money movies are generally tucked in the early summer months, so June and July, as well as the holiday months, so primarily November and December. And these months are going to be sleeping so sweetly knowing that people have time and money to spend on them during these times. So dropping down 1 tier now to the middle bunk, and I just want to say before I offend anyone, there's nothing wrong with liking this part of the bunk bed, alright? That's fine, you're allowed to like this part. But, that being said, it is a lower tier in my eyes just because it lacks the thrill and the excitement of the top bunk, right? You remove that top bunk and you're just left with a regular old bed. The middle bunk kind of symbolizes the everyday here, so when we're talking about the movie business again, this tier is essentially for all the months that don't qualify as the sort of peak seasons that we were just talking about, or don't qualify as a dump month, which brings us down to the next category. The basement.
The basement, the basement, the basement, the basement.
The dump months sleep down below in what I like to call the basement of the bunk. Think of this as sort of like the upside down from Stranger Things. This tier is dark, this tier is cold, this tier is somehow dusty and sticky at the same time, and there's not even enough room for a mattress down there, so you're sleeping right on the floor. There are 2 sets of months here that qualify as dump months, the first and lesser one being August and September. Kids are starting to go back to school, and people are starting to save money for the holidays, but the more important one here are the months of January and February, which will be referred to from now on as Dumpuary. Dumpuary is like this post-holiday season hangover where the Hollywood studios release something that I like to call duds. A dud is a bad movie, but not the kind of bad movie where it's so bad it's good. It's the kind where it's just a straight-up stinker. And year after year, Dumpuary has been notoriously bad for consistently releasing these types of movies. But I wanted to see just how bad Dumpuary really was, so I went and did some research. I went back and looked at every movie released in theaters during January and February over the last 20 years, and yeah, it's pretty bad. I came up with a list of 367 movies, and while there are some great movies scattered throughout that list, the average Rotten Tomatoes critic score for all those movies over the last 20 years was only 40%. So, just for comparison, I went and did the same thing for the month of December over the last 20 years, and that was a bit better. That one has an average of 61%. That's more of a standard. But heck, you're probably wondering at this point in the episode, well, heck, what does this all have to do with romance? The title says romance. Where's all the romance at? Well, 367 movies is a lot, and I wanted to do them justice, so I decided to break things up a little bit, and I ended up sorting all these movies into these sort of categories. And so each episode in this series will be focused on one of the following genres. There's comedy, horror, drama thriller, super, which is supernatural or superhero-based movies, hunk cinema, action, family movies, and, of course, this episode, romance. So what we're going to do here in these episodes is have a little discussion about each of those categories, and then I will be presenting 3 awards from a group of nominees handpicked by yours truly. The Top Bunk Award is pretty simple. It's going to be given to the best movie, in my opinion. The Middle Bunk Award will be given to a film that either best represents the genre as a whole, or has earned some sort of distinction over the rest of the nominees. But, most importantly, a champion will be selected and awarded with the trash crown and the title of the biggest dud. I will be using Rotten Tomatoes scores throughout this series as a sort of reference point, because I haven't seen all of the 367 movies on this list. However, I must have seen the entire film for it to be crowned a champion of the duds. This coffee is dry. So today I wanted to start with romance just because it's the easiest one to understand as to why there are so many romantic movies released in Dumpuary, and that is because of Valentine's Day. Studios have been able to capitalize on this commercialized time of year and can turn massive profits on a relatively cheap movie to make. Out of all the genres here, romance comes in third at the box office with an average of $125 million from 50 movies that I found. The problem with rom-coms typically is that they are so catered towards a certain type of audience that they often aren't the highest quality films, in my opinion, of course. But the expectations around them seem rather low as far as quality goes. This is also reflected in the average Rotten Tomatoes score, which sits below the total average score we talked about earlier, 40%. Romance sits at 33%. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about what a rom-com is or what makes a good romance film, but essentially what we're looking for here are three main components. So firstly, we're looking for good-looking, gorgeous, beautiful people. Secondly, we're looking for a will they or won't they scenario. And thirdly, we're looking for yes, they will, they always do with a rom-com. This is key here because this is like the comfort food genre in that it's enjoyable while you're consuming it, but then you feel kind of gross and guilty afterwards. Before we get to the nominees and start handing out awards, to help you sort of get the feel of the type of movie we're talking about here, I've prepared a little romantic compilation for you. So go grab a snack, then come back, sit back, relax, and enjoy this little presentation, and I'll see you on the other side.
Tonight?
It actually doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's never bigger than your thumb.
Because of you.
You like this, right?
A little bit.
Why don't you get your hands off me?
Oh, yeah, I needed that.
Don't ever do that again.
We're having sex.
I know.
First date, and you're already inviting yourself to stay the night?
What?
I don't know, I'm just a little scandalized, so.
So it's like a dog, right?
Welcome back. So now that we're all hot and bothered, let's get to the awards portion of the show. We're going to start with the mid-tier award here, which will go to the movie that I feel best captures the essence of the romance genre. Not the best movie per se, but the best representative of the genre as a whole. So here are the nominees. So the first nominee is Save the Last Dance. This film's from 2001. It's got 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. As genre, it's listed as romance, dance, drama. So dance is a genre that I actually didn't add to my list. I should have done that. I'm sorry. Apologies. I do have a soft spot for this movie just because I first saw it on TV when I was a teen. So there's a bit of nostalgia there. I don't think it holds up as well today. But also, Julia Stiles was in it, and she made me feel tingly inside in ways that I did not understand at the time, but I definitely understand now. Anyways, this movie veers a little bit too much into the drama category, but there is enough there from the dance choreography and the performances that it's worth recommending. Alright, so next up we have How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. This one's from 2003. It's got 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. And here we have a true rom-com. We've got the good-looking people in Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson. We've got a weird premise with some self-centered people, but we watched it recently as part of my research, and it's relatively harmless. Next up is 50 First Dates. This one's from 2004. It's got 45% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has Adam Sandler before he wore everyone's patience a little too thin, but it also has Drew Barrymore being as charming as ever. This one goes a little too hard on the Adam Sandler brand of comedy, but it ends up having a pretty charming premise and conclusion. Next up is Hitch from 2005. This one has Will Smith as a love guru. It made huge money at the box office, over $366 million, mostly because of Will Smith. And this movie is one of the best reviewed in the genre actually on this list at 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is nice. At 1% higher than Hitch, we have Definitely Maybe from 2008. This one sits at 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's one of Ryan Reynolds' best movies before he became Deadpool and took over Hollywood. It also has Abigail Breslin, which makes it very wholesome viewing. It's a good one. Lastly, we have Warm Bodies. This one's from 2013. It's sitting at 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is the second highest of the whole romance category here. It's got a little bit of everything going on. It's got comedy, it's got zombies, it's got a little bit of action, but is it romantic enough? And the winner is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. This movie fits into the rom-com mold so well. Even though the plot is nonsense and the characters are not really relatable at all, the stars are just so charismatic that you don't really care what despicable things they're doing. It's a perfect example of a movie where you can just turn your brain off and there's nothing wrong with that. Would I recommend it to a friend though? No, I don't think I would. But if you want an easy movie for like a date night or anything like that, you could do much worse than this one. Now, moving on to a movie that I actually would recommend, it's time for the top tier award for the movie that deserves top bunk privileges. In future episodes, there will be multiple nominees for this award. Unfortunately, this time around, there weren't any movies that were even close to contending in this category, and therefore the award will go straight to Her. Her, 2014, 94%. It's an obvious winner here. This one challenges the conventions of the typical romance film that comes out during this time. It deserves the win because it's an emotional, beautifully shot movie with awesome music and even better performances. Joaquin Phoenix is awesome as always. Scarlett Johansson is great as just a voice on a phone. And this is a movie that's going to be relevant for years to come. Really recommend it. The Basement.
The basement, the basement, the basement, the basement.
And finally, it is time to crown a champion. This is tricky because this category has all kinds of duds of all shapes and sizes here. If you want to take a look at the rest of the films I did not nominate, I've posted a link in the description of the complete list with the Rotten Tomatoes scores and box office numbers if you're curious and you want to see the rest of the films in the romance category. But let's get to it. Here's my list of nominees for the biggest dud. So we're going to be starting with the film Just Go With It. This one's from 2011. It's got 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got Adam Sandler again, and we know Adam Sandler, if he's capable of making something decent, then you know he's just as capable of making something bad as well. So unfortunately, this is on the bad side. It's got all the grossness that usually comes with the territory of an Adam Sandler film, but this one doesn't have the charm that 50 First Dates has. This one's a stinker. Next up, we've got Fool's Gold from 2008. This one's sitting at a measly 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. This one is an action-adventure romance. It features the same good-looking people that we talked about before. It's got Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson, but for whatever reason, they just lack the chemistry in this one. It's not funny, it's not cute, it's just a straight-up bore, and this one is part of the dud nominees. Something different for our next nominee here, not a movie but rather a person. Shout out to Nicholas Sparks. Now, Nicholas Sparks is the guy who brought us The Notebook, which is an all-time classic as far as romance movies go. But he's also responsible for writing 10 other films. 4 of those movies have come out during Dumpuary, and baby, you know they're nominated today. Let's take a look. So first up in the Sparks collection, we have A Walk to Remember. This one's from 2003, 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has a 77% audience score. And I'm going to have to agree with the audience here and say it's the best of the bunch. The next one's a big one. It's Dear John. This one's from 2010. It's 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it features Channing Tatum, who we'll talk about later. This one, unfortunately, though, is a sap, which is to say it's sad, it's sticky, and it's slow. Next up in our Sparks collection, we have Safe Haven. This one's from 2013. It's got 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. I actually didn't watch this one, so I'm sorry about that. Moving on to the next and last one is The Choice. This one's at 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, came out in 2016. I actually did watch this one a few days ago for research for this video, so you don't have to. It's my Sparks champion, as in it's the worst of the bunch. This one's a dud. It's super long, super cheesy, super sappy, and very predictable. Not great. Don't recommend. Moving on to our next nominee now, we're talking 50 Shades of Grey. This one's from 2015, 25% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I made the choice to actually watch this movie for this episode, and that was a choice that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. I couldn't bring myself to watch the 2 sequels, however, and those both came out in Dumpuary as well, but they're both sitting at 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, even lower than this one that I actually did watch, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on much there. Shockingly though, these movies made mad cash. The first one alone made over $636 million, which explains the existence of those 2 sequels, but it's also just sad that this depiction of romance is by far the most viewed in this genre. I was actually set on crowning The Choice as my champion of worst romance movie of Dumpuary, because I feel as though Nicholas Sparks deserves to be awarded for his ability to put out so many duds and keep getting away with it. However, that was before I watched the true champion. 50 Shades of Grey takes the trash crown. Congratulations, you did it.
You did it.
Despite everything looking good on the surface level, the film was just empty inside, with each spank echoing through the dead space that was the film's plot, and for a movie that was supposed to be some sort of erotic revolution, there were so many half-baked sex scenes that it became mundane. Now, before we wrap up here, we have something to settle. It's the Battle of the Hunks, baby. This week, it's Southern Charm versus Straight Up Beef, as we have Matthew McConaughey versus Channing Tatum for the title of Biggest Hunk. Matthew starred in 3 films dominating the early 2000s, while Channing had 2 huge hits in 2010 and 2011 with Dear John and The Vow, which, by the way, I thought The Vow was also a Nicholas Sparks movie, which actually was not the case, so apologies for that. Anyways, Matthew's going to have to take the crown on this one here. He was the face of rom-coms for so long, and he was able to pull himself out of that hole, and he's having a huge amount of success right now, so congrats to him. Sorry, Channing, you were really, really close. Enjoy the beef, though. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Please join us for the next episode as we take a look at one of my favorite categories, horror. And stay tuned for more content on stuff like movies, farts and butts, that kind of fun stuff. Take care.